Hey guys, Matt here and welcome to episode 4 of Game Gengo's Vocabulary Series. Sorry for the wait guys, I've been really busy working on all kinds of videos, so I hope you guys have been enjoying what I've been putting out, and now finally we're back with episode 4 of the Vocabulary Series. And in this episode we're going to be covering just over 100 new words, putting our total now at 17% of the N5, 12% of the N4, 8% of the N3, and 2% of both the N2 and the N1. And as of this episode, we have now covered 5% of the entire JLPT's vocab. So we're slowly making our steps through. But that's quite interesting. Episode 4, 5%. I wonder, would it be possible to somehow do 100% in 100 episodes? I don't think so, but we shall see, won't we? So, for this episode, we are going to be going through the #1 voted game by you, the viewer, and that is Fire Emblem Three Houses. So, this is a really cool game that I've really been looking forward to covering, actually. It has a super interesting variety of language being used from both kind of fantasy speech, we have also keigo, but we also have standard speech as well as kind of just normal slang. So it's quite a good mixture of language, and it's really useful if you like the fantasy genre, like Final Fantasy or any kind of fantasy novel or book or anything like that. So it's a very interesting series, and I'm very much looking forward to getting into today's episode. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the supporters on Patreon. Thank you so much guys for all of your support, and if you guys are enjoying Game Gengo and if you want to see more of the content, please feel free to join as a Game Gengo member on Patreon, and you can come join us learn Japanese together as we kind of play games together, learn Japanese, help each other with questions, study methods, and really just be social in a kind of positive learning Japanese environment. So if you want a cool community to study Japanese with, feel free to join us at Game Gengo. So without further ado, let's get into Fire Emblem Three Houses. Okay, so starting off here we have Teikoku Reki 91年 Tarutin Heigen. So Teikoku here is the word for an empire, right? But we have Teikoku Reki. This means that it is the imperial year. So this Reki here is kind of like talking about the history of something in a way of like the calendar year. So it's like the imperial year, talking about the history of the empire. So empire turns into imperial, and then Reki is here to show the calendar year. So it's the calendar year for the empire, 91年, year 91. So if we put it all together, Teikoku Reki 91年, imperial year 91, Tarutin Heigen. So Tarutin is the name of the place where they're all having this kind of battle, and then Heigen is for the plains. So the actual battlefield, the plains. So Tarutin Plains might be Tarutin Heigen. So this n is kind of a huh? You might see this word sometimes used that way as a kind of huh? Also just might be used or n. Seiros-sama. So Seiros here is the person's name. So this might be Seiros, right, in English. And sama is used as a suffix after a name to show kind of respect towards that person. So it's kind of the honorifics where you have kind of chan is very cute, kun is kind of boyish, san is very standard, and sama is putting them above you, right? So if you were to say someone's very grand and above, you would call someone sama. right? I often joke, I call Gakdo, the famous musician, Gakdo-sama. It puts him above this very godly position where you put someone with sama. Here, they are showing that level of respect because he is a mere soldier and he is saying it's Lady Seiros. So, Seiros-sama. And so here Seiros says, Akakitani o oboiteru ka? So Akai is red, and then Tani here is for a valley, so the Red Valley. But we can see here that Akai is read as Akaki. What's up with that? So this is actually the old way of conjugating E adjectives, very archaic way of speaking. So Akaki here is the same as Akai. So Akaki Tani is the same as Akai Tani. Now, this is often used with kind of archaic speech, or maybe you're wanting to sound a little bit more like literary you might see in like writing, lyrics, songs, poems, things like that. And so here, Akaki Tani is the same as Akai Tani, a red valley. So here we see Akakitani o oboeteiru ka. So oboeru means to remember something or to memorize something. Here it's really remember, right? Because it's in a question. Do you remember the Red Valley? Akakitani o oboeteiru ka?
Nemesis.
So Nemesis is the name of this guy that she's holding the dagger to his throat. Nemesis. Okay, and off to a very graphic start, quite the polar opposite to our last episode. So here, she's stabbing him to death and she's yelling, Shine, Shine, Shine! So shinu here is the verb to die. Shine is the kind of imperative form, so die, die, shine. Then she says, Kisama ga watashi kara subete o. So Kisama ga, you are the one that, so they did some action. Kisama is a way of kind of talking about someone in a very disrespectful way. So you wouldn't use this normally. Kisama, it's kind of an anime manga way of talking. Kisama, right? You might picture Vegeta yelling at Goku saying something like this. Watashi kara, so watashi is me, kara is from, so from me, subete o, so we can see that he did something to subete. He did something to everything, subete meaning everything. What did he do? We can kind of already guess from context. She's relatively angry at him, so it's pretty safe to guess that he may have stolen everything from her, because it's watashi kara, from me, subete o, so doing something to everything. It's pretty obvious, you've stolen everything from me. Kisama ga watashi kara subete o. Okay, and so now after stabbing that poor guy to death, she now embraces the sword that's covered in blood and she says, Oka-sama. So Ka-san is the name for mother, right? Ka-san. But Oka-sama, this is now saying in an honorable way, mother. right? So the o is the honorable, and then sama is also the honorable, so she's speaking in honorific language, okasama, mother.
Onushi.
Next, we have this weird transition into this dark temple type place, and we have this girl with green hair, and she notices you and she says, Onushi. So Onushi here is a kind of archaic way of referring to you. So it's like anata, but it's more archaic way of talking. So Onushi here, she is speaking to either an equal or an inferior when she says this. And so, you, Onushi,
そこで何をしておる?
Then she says, そこで何をしておる? So, そこ there, de, by there, so at that place, そこで何をしておる is just a different way of saying 何をしている. What is it that you're doing? However, she speaks in a little bit more of an old-fashioned tone, and you'll see it being used like this. One thing to quickly note, though, is this is not humble speech that you may learn in standard grammar books and things like that. Te oru can also be humble way of speaking of your own actions. She's not speaking of her own actions here. She's speaking of your actions. And that is where it's an indication that this is actually an old way of speaking rather than, the humble speech. And I know that's a little bit confusing, but this is actually, if you watch a lot of like tiger dramas, like kind of period dramas with samurai and things like that, you'll see that they used oru instead of iru to talk about, the verb of doing something. So, 勉強している, 勉強しておる. And even some dialects use that right now today. They use oru instead of iru.
いかにしてここに入り込んだのか知らぬが。
Okay, so now the cutscenes have finished and we can see that this girl continues to talk and she says, いかにしてここに入り込んだのか知らぬが. And so, いかにして is actually a very similar expression to どうやって. However, this is just perhaps a little bit more formal, a little bit more eloquent, right? どうやって is a very common, casual way of saying how or in what way. But いかにして is perhaps a little bit more literary or a little bit more polite or a little bit more fancy way of talking. So, いかにしてここに, koko is the place, so to here, ここに入り込んだ. So this 入り込む here is a new verb, and this actually means to come into, to penetrate into, to, get into. So here, ここに入り込んだのか知らぬが. So how it is that you entered here, いかにしてここに入り込んだのか知らぬ. Shiranu is another one of those kind of a little bit archaic ways of saying shiranai. Just like you would see in like a period piece with samurai talking, they would say nu instead of nai. So shiranai, shiranu. So she's saying, I don't know how you got in here, but いかにしてここに入り込んだのか知らぬが.
わしの寝顔を盗み見るとはなあ。はあ、まったく。
Now, this is a really interesting piece of language because here she calls herself washi instead of, for example, watashi, right? Washi currently in modern Japanese is mostly used by men, sometimes older men, right? Like old oji-chans, right? They're kind of the old guys. And you might often see that, right? Like, washi wa, like very old man speech. However, here she's clearly not an old man, but she's using it. Why is that? Well, actually, in kind of the recent past, this was actually a term that often women would use, right, with people that were kind of a little bit more familiar with them to kind of speak in a little bit more common way. Lately, it's been more used by men. However, it can be used by both, right? Especially in this historical context where it's showing that this is kind of an old way of her speaking. She's referring to herself as washi. So it gives this air of kind of an old person. Like she already feels a little bit ancient in the way that she's been talking already. Next we have negao, and negao is the sleeping face. Neru to sleep, gao is the face, or kao is the face. So negao, negao, that is your sleeping face. So I saw her sleeping face, and we can see that with the next word here, which is nusumi miru. Now, nusumu is to steal, miru is to look, put it together, to steal a glance, to steal a look, right? So it's kind of like she's implying that I wasn't supposed to see her sleeping face, and I've stolen a look. I've kind of, stolen a glance of seeing her sleeping, right? So she's a little bit embarrassed, for example. So, washi no negao no sumimiru to wa na, to think that you would steal a glance at my sleeping face. Mattaku. So, is like a sigh, and then mattaku is like good grief, right? Like, geez.
もうそっとちこうよれ。お主の姿をよく見せよ。
Okay, and next she says, Mosoto chiko yore. Onushi no sugata o yoku miseo. So, mosoto here is a word to say mo skoshi, right? Just a little bit more. So, mosoto, and then we have a word that I'm sure most people would have misread. You may think this is chikao, but actually it's chiko. And this is actually the old way of conjugating chikai, to be close. So instead of chikaku, it used to be chiko. So this is an archaic way of talking. So again, we're really getting these archaic vibes from her. And she says chiko yore. So this is saying approach me closer. More soto, a little bit more skoshi, right? Now yore here is to approach, to come close, to kind of, come near. And so you could say, perhaps in a little bit more normal way of speaking, you could say, "Mou skoshi chikaku ni yotte kudasai," right? Please approach a little bit closer. But she's speaking in a very archaic way, and so she says, "Mosoto chiko yore." Then she says, "Onushi no sugata o yoku miseo." So onushi, you, onushi no sugata, that means your appearance. Again, we've learnt sugata from the last Animal Crossing episode. So onushi no sugata o yoku mise. Yoku, to do well, miseru, to show. So yoku mise means to show well. So she's kind of saying, hey, let me get a good look at you, right? So, mosoto chiko yore, onushi no sugata o yoku miseo. Come a little bit closer, let me have a good look at you.
知らぬ顔のようじゃの。一体何者じゃ。
Then next she says, Ho, shiranu kao no you ja no. Ittai nanimono ja. So, ho is a way of kind of showing surprise to something. It's like, oh, right? Ho. Then shiranu kao. So, shiranu means shiranai, shiranu kao, a face I don't know. No yo ja. So, no yo means to appear to be a certain way, like yoda, to appear to be a certain way, but here the da is being turned into ja. So again, more archaic way of speaking, but it doesn't end there. We even have no at the end, and this no is actually a more older way of saying na or ne. So here, in a very archaic old way of speaking, you can see shiranu kao no you ja no, which you might often see in a tiger drama. For example, I've seen this expression a lot in like Atsuhime, the main girl character, even the men, they will often say no instead of na or ne.
実はそちの娘のことで頼みがあっての。
Right, so this is an old way of using that expression. But if we wanted to turn this into something that could actually be useful for you, 知らない顔のようだな, or 知らない顔のようですね. It appears to be a face I don't know. Then she says, 一体何者じゃ? So, 一体 means what in the world, and 何者 is what kind of person. Like saying, who are you? Who in the world are you? 一体何者じゃ? Ja, again, we see again, is the more archaic way, the older way of saying da. So, ja, if you see this being used, just replace it with da, and you know that that's what it actually means. So, ittai nanimono da, we've seen in Final Fantasy VII Remake quite a lot of times. Here, ittai nanimono ja is just a little bit more archaic way of saying this. And so you have three options that you can reply to when she questions you. You can say 幽霊だ, 邪神だ, or 人間だ. So first, 幽霊だ. 幽霊 here is the word for a ghost. So if you ever want to talk about that kind of ghost, that is 幽霊. So you could reply and say, I'm a ghost, 幽霊だ. Or you could reply and say, 邪神だ. I'm an evil god. So here, 邪 is often used to kind of speak of something evil, wicked, or bad, right? Shin is often used with some sort of godly figure, right? You often see it with the word like jinja to talk about a shrine, but it's also seen in lots of other ways, and it can even be read as kami, literally for god. So Jashin here is an evil god. But I don't want to lie, so I'm going to use the last expression here, Ningenda. Now, we've actually seen this expression in the N5 kanji video that I just released, but this means human. So, Ningenda, I am a human. Now, that's true, I don't feel like lying, so I'm going to say, I'm a human, Ningenda.
Onushi, 人間と言うたな。ならば名を名乗れ。俺、徳千子。
And in reply to that, she says, Onushi, 人間と言うたな。ならば名を名乗れ。ほれ、徳千か。So, Onushi, you, ningen, human, to iuta. Now, this is actually an old way of saying itta, right? I said. And you actually can see some connection here with currently used language. Sometimes iu can be said you, right? Without the e. And you can see this connection here where it's actually iuta instead of itta. This is actually commonly used in the Kansai region still to this day. And sometimes there's actually a little bit of overlap between Kansai Ben and a little bit more archaic speech, sometimes. So like how we have oru in place of iru, even when you're not speaking humbly, you can use it as well. So this is an interesting piece of language that is useful for learning Kansai Ben, for example, and it's also useful here seeing the archaic use, iuttana. So this is ningen to ittana. You said you are a human. Ningen to iuttana. Then she says naraba. Naraba means if that's the case, in that case, na o nanore. So na is your name. Now you might know this if you've seen that movie Kimi no Na wa, your name, right? Na o nanore. Nanoru means to give one's name, to proclaim one's name, to reveal one's name. So she's saying, if that's the case, tell me your name. Naraba, nao nanore. Hore, come on. Tokusenka. So hore means come on, and then tokusenka. So toku here means to do something quickly. It's like suguni, right? So toku and then senka is actually really interesting because again, this piece of language is actually commonly used in Kansai Ben, and this means shinai, right? So won't you hurry up? Tokusenka. Just like saying, hayaku shinai ka? Won't you hurry up?
なるほど。さすがは人の子。耳慣れぬなじゃの。
So, なるほど here means I understand, I see. Sasuga wa means as one would expect. So just as I'd expect, sasuga wa, and then we have hito no ko. So hito no ko actually means the son of a person, but here it's just talking about humans, right? So it's someone who's born as a human, right? Hito no ko. So sasuga wa hito no ko. As expected from someone who is born from a human, minarenu na ja no. So minarenai means that something is not familiar. You are not familiar with na, the name. Minarenai na, a name you're not familiar with, minarenu na. And then jano is like dana or desne. So minarenu na jano. So as we put it all together, naruhodo, I see sasuga wa hito no ko, as expected of a human, minarenu na jano. It's a name that I'm not familiar with.
人間なればこれにも答えられよう。何の節の何の日の生まれじゃ。
So, ningen nareba. Ningen is human. Nareba here is actually a little bit of archaic speak again, and this is kind of like a kara, right? Because or since. So ningen dakara, ningen nareba, since you're a human, kore ni mo kotaerareyo. So kore ni mo, this as well, kotaerareyo. You should be able to answer. Kotaeru means to answer something. Kotaerareru, to be able to answer something. Kotaerareyo, you seem to be able to answer something. And then she says, nan no setsu no nan no hi no umare ja. So, nan no setsu. Setsu here is a way of referring to a period or a term or even kind of like a season. In the game translation, they might actually call it like the moon, right? Like which moon were you born on? This is more talking about a season, right? Nan no setsu no nan no hi. Nan no hi is what day. So what day of what moon, or what day of one season, or what day of what term, no umare. Umare is the noun for birth. So, of what moon and what day are you born? So in the game translation, they actually say, beneath which moon and on what day were you born into this world? It isn't literally a moon, but you can see that it's kind of a season of something. And this is used in this sense where the selection that we do afterwards is actually very strange kind of seasons that are actually based on kind of the old way of breaking apart a year rather than months.
わしと同じとは。おかしな偶然もあったものじゃ。
And so she's very surprised by my answer, and here she says,
わしと同じとは。
So nani is like what, and then washi to onaji. So washi talking about herself, to onaji means the same as. So the same as myself, towa, to think. So to think that it's the same as my birthday. Washi to onaji to wa. And then she says, okashi na guzen mo atta mono ja. So, okashi na guzen. Both of these words are new words. Okashi means strange, right? If something's a little bit strange, you might say, okashi ne. So this is actually kind of like not what is normally expected, right? Okashi is something that's like, oh, that's a bit strange. You're a bit strange. Chotto okashi. Okashi na. So this is a strange guzen. Now, guzen is a coincidence, something that's happening purely by chance. So she says that things that are purely by chance, strange coincidences also happen, huh? So, okashi na guzen is a strange coincidence. Mo atta mono ja, so is mo atta mono da. Mono here is actually used to show a little bit of emphasis on what's being said. So she's like, there are also strange coincidences, Here she's just showing surprise at the fact that, your birthday is the same as hers. And she's like, hey, I guess there are some strange coincidences,
何やら懐かしい心地がするが、わしはもう一眠りするかな。
何やら懐かしい心地がするが、わしはもう一眠りするかな。So, nani yara, this means for some reason, right? So, showing an element of surprise. For some reason, natsukashi kokochi. So, kokochi here is a feeling. Natsukashi is a nostalgic feeling. So, it seems at some rate, at any rate, for some reason, it's a nostalgic feeling. So, nani yara, natsukashi kokochi ga suru ga. I have a strange feeling, however, washi wa mo hitonemuri suru kana. Maybe I'll have a nap already. So, washi, me, as for me, more already, and then hitonemuri here is literally one sleep. If you look at it literally like this, but this just means a short sleep or a nap. So, hitonemuri suru, I'm going to have a nap, kana, I guess, or maybe. So if you put it all together, nani yara natsukashi kokochi ga suru ga, washi wa mo hitonemuri suru kana. This feeling is oddly nostalgic, but I guess maybe I'll take another nap. And as she's drifting off to sleep, she says, Munya, haji, Chikai. So this is a kind of interesting little bit to try and look at. There is actually some hidden language in this expression right here. Munya is not a meaning. This is often kind of like right, that kind of feeling where she's falling asleep. It's like a cat, right? In that way. Haji here, I believe, has something to do with hajimeru or hajime, so the beginning of something. And then we have kai, and this, I believe, is actually more connected to chikai, to be close. So the beginning is close. Hajime ga chikai. The beginning is close. Now, in the game translation, they did pick up on this, and they actually say it's almost time to begin.
Oi, sorosoro okiro.
Okay, and now we have a very manly looking guy, and he says, Oi, sorosoro okiro. So oi is like hey, sorosoro means like about now, like anytime soon, right? So before long. So sorosoro okiro, okiru means to wake up, okiro is the imperative form, so hey, you should get up soon. Oi, sorosoro okiro. And then he says,
Mata ano yume demo mite ta ka?
So mata means again, ano yume, ano means that, and then yume here is actually a dream. So that dream, ano yume demo, something like that dream again, miteta ka, did you see it again? And so here I have two options. I can either reply with senso no yume. This means senso is war, yume is dream, so a dream about war. Senso no yume. Or I can say shoujo no yume. So shoujo here is a little girl, or even a kind of a young maiden or a young lady, right? It's usually talking about someone between the ages of before turning into an adult, so before 18, and sometime after maybe 6 or 7 years old, right? So we have this kind of gap here where it's shoujo is a young girl, right? So she's no longer like a baby or a toddler, she's a girl, right? Shoujo no yume, a dream of a young girl. Now, both of these are technically true, right? I did begin my dream with a dream about a war and a battle, and then I finished my dream with a strange dream about a little girl. So I can pick either of these. So I decide to pick the dream that is more recent in my memory, shoujo no yume, a dream about a young girl.
お前の話を聞く限り、そんな奴には会ったことはねえんだがな。
So here there's a feeling that I just told him the story about the girl and I've described her to him. And so he says, Omae no hanashi, your story, the thing that you just said, or kiku kagiri. This means as long as I hear. Kagiri here is an interesting piece of language here where it can mean the limits of something, it can mean the bounds and the end of something, but here it's actually used to kind of say like as far as you've said or as far as I've heard, right? Kiku kagiri, as far as I've heard from your story, omae no hanashi o kiku kagiri, sonna yatsu ni wa, so sonna means that kind of yatsu, that kind of guy or girl. So, sonna yatsu ni wa, as for that kind of girl, atta koto wa ne daga na. So, atta koto wa ne is the same as atta koto wa nai. I have not met. So he's just saying that, look, as far as you've said, as far as you've described to me, I've never met a person like that before. Omae no hanashi o kiku kagiri, sonna yatsu ni wa atta koto wa ne daga na.
まあいい、そんなもん忘れちまえ。戦いに雑念はいらん。
まあいい、そんなもん忘れちまえ。戦いに雑念はいらん。So, まあいい. This is like, well, it's okay. Well, whatever. まあいい. そんなもん, that kind of thing. So, about that. そんなもん忘れちまえ. So, 忘れる is to forget something, and then 忘れちまえ is the imperative form telling him to completely forget about something. 忘れてしまおう to completely forget, and it's turned into an imperative, so 忘れちまえ. So if you ever see this ちまえ, you know that it's the imperative form of てしまお, so chao, so ordering someone to completely do something. wasurechimae, forget about it. Tatakai ni, so tatakai means a battle, and then ni is at a battle. So at a battle, zatsunen wa iran. Zatsunen means kind of idle thoughts, like your mind is wandering, right? And then iran is a kind of a little bit of a Kansai Ben way of saying iranai, I don't need it. It's also a kind of tough guy way of saying I don't need it. So this is not language that you would use normally. It sounds very rude. If someone says, do you need something? And you are like, iran. That's a very rough, tough way of saying you don't need something. So don't say this at the cash register at a supermarket or a 7-Eleven. You might scare someone if they're like, oh, do you need a plastic bag? Iran. A little bit too strong. You might just say iranai or even irimasen. I don't need it. But here we've got a tough guy, so he says, you don't need it. What don't you need? Zatsunen, kind of idle thoughts.
俺たち傭兵の仕事は命がけなんだ。余計なこと考えてると早死にするぞ。
And so he continues on explaining, and here he says, 俺たち傭兵の仕事は命がけなんだ。余計なことを考えてると早死にするぞ。So, 俺たち。Ore is the masculine way of referring to oneself. Oretachi is now a plural, so us. Oretachi, us. Oretachi, your hair. Your hair is an incredibly common word. If you're interested in any media that uses swords and fantasy settings, Final Fantasy, anything like that, your hair is a word that you will learn almost immediately, and this means a mercenary. So Cloud Strife is a mercenary. He is a Yorhair. Guts from Berserk is a Yorhair. He is a mercenary. So a very, very, very common word. So Oretachi Yorhair, us mercenaries, no shigoto wa, as for the work of us mercenaries, inochi gake nanda. It is something that we risk our lives to do. So inochi gake is inochi, your life, and then kake, to kind of bet or to kind of risk. So inochi gake is to risk one's life. You are putting your life on the line. So the work us mercenaries do is putting our lives on the line. Oretachi yohei no shigoto wa inochi gake nanda. Yoke na koto. So yoke means something that's not needed. It's unnecessary. It's too much. It's going over. So yoke na koto meaning, the thing that's too much, or kangaiteru to. So if you are thinking of something that you don't need to think about, right? You're thinking of some unnecessary things. Yoke na koto o kangaiteru to hayaji ni suru zo. So hayaji ni means a premature death. Hayaji ni suru means to die a premature death. So he's saying that, look, you don't have time for this, right? You're putting your life on the line. If you're going to be thinking about things that you don't need to think about, you're going to die young, right? You're going to have a premature death.
俺たち傭兵の仕事は命がけなんだ。余計なこと考えてると早死にするぞ。
Work for us mercenaries is putting our lives on the line. Unnecessarily thinking will only get you killed quickly.
さあ、とっとと支度しな。次は王国での仕事だ。
さあ、とっとと支度しな。So, sa is like, well now, right? It's kind of like, all right then, well then, sa. It's a way of kind of grabbing someone's attention and saying, all right then, come on, sa. Tottoto here means quickly, at once, as quick as possible, right? So tottoto, and then shitaku. Shitaku means to prepare for something. Now, shina is actually a very rough way of saying shite. It's the same as like shiro. So shina, he is ordering you to, hurry up and do the preparations. So, tottoto shitaku shina is the same as tottoto shitaku shiro. Do the preparations straight away. Then he says, tsugi wa okoku de no shigoto da. So, tsugi wa, as for next time, okoku is actually for a kingdom, or in this case, a monarchy. So this story kind of revolves around a church, and so okoku here is talking about that monarchy. So going to the kingdom, the monarchy. Tsugi wa okoku de no shigoto da. Next up is our work with the kingdom, or in the kingdom, or in the monarchy.
少し距離があるから夜が明けたら出ると言っといたろう。
So skoshi means a little bit, and then this new word here is kyori. Now kyori means a distance, right? You're talking about the distance from A to B. It's quite a long distance. So skoshi kyori ga aru we have quite a bit of distance, kara, so, yoru ga aketara deru to ittoita ro. So, yoru here means the night, right? So when it's nighttime, it's yoru. Yoru ga aketara, this is an interesting bit of expression right here because akeru here is actually one of the kanji that you can use to say to open something. But here it's actually used to refer to it dawning, to grow light, or the end of a period. What period? Yoru, the night. So yoru ga aketara, literally, if you were to think about it, when the night opens, but that's not how it's being used. It's when the night dawns, when the night comes to an end, when the dawn comes, right? Yoru ga aketara, deru, to leave. Deru to ittoita ro. So, I said that we're going to leave once the night ends, right? So, 少し距離があるから because there's quite a little bit of distance, 夜が明けたら when the night is over or when the dawn comes, 出ると言っといたろ I said that we're gonna leave, right? And then again, I have two choices. I can either say そうだけ or I can say あ、そういえば. So these two expressions are super duper duper important and useful to learn. そうだけ is used to say kind of, is that right? So here it's showing that he's forgotten that his dad actually said this. Yes, by the way, this is his dad. Or I can say そういえば, and that means come to think of it or now that you mention it. So そうだけ here shows that he's forgetful, right? And this, I actually don't want to come off that way. I might kind of look like I'm not paying attention. So I'd rather say そういえば. That's like, now that you mention it, yeah. So it shows that I'm on board. It shows that I know what he's talking about. So now that you mention it, そういえば.
まったく、お前以外はもう外で待ってるぞ.
And no matter which one I reply with, he says, まったく、お前以外はもう外で待ってるぞ. So まったく, again, geez or come on or good grief. And then he says, お前以外. お前 is a way of talking about you, but it's kind of putting you down. お前以外, 以外 means like except for you. So except for you, as for except for you, もう already 外で, 外 is outside, so at outside, 外で待ってるぞ. That means they are waiting. Who? Except for you. So everyone except for you, right? He hasn't said everyone, but it's implied here, where お前以外 means those that are other than you, right? So お前以外はもう外で待ってるぞ. Everyone except for you is already waiting outside.
ジェラルドさん、すまんが来てもらっていいか?
And just as that is happening, a kind of guard appears and he says, ジェラルドさん、すまんが来てもらっていいか? So ジェラルドさん, Gerald, and you can see that he's speaking to him in a kind of, a little bit of a formal, polite way because he uses son, right? So he's kind of being a little bit respectful to him. And he says, suman ga. Suman is actually an expression to say sumanai, sumimasen. So suman ga, excuse me, but. However, again, this is kind of a little bit older, archaic way of talking. You wouldn't really use suman as much nowadays, although some more masculine characters might use it instead. You might see the kind of rough, fatherly figure still use this language. In fact, I believe I've seen the character, the dad from Persona 4 use it, for example, right? But this isn't necessarily, language that everyone's going to use. Here, it's actually not being rude. It's just an old way of saying it. So, suman ga, I'm sorry, but, 来てもらっていいか? So, 来てもらう means to have you come. Kuru to come, morao to receive. So to receive you coming, teいいか, is it okay? So is it okay if I have you come with me?
どうした?
どうした? What's wrong? Now, this word どうした is, what's up, what's wrong. You can see it used in all kinds of different ways. For example, you could see it a little bit more politely, like どうしましたか? What's the matter? This is just what's wrong. どうした? Now, the kanji are usually not used. However, some of these kanji are pretty useful. So, hey, it's not too bad to kind of become a little bit familiar with seeing this kanji in the wild. So, どうした? What's wrong? 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 どうした? W
突然申し訳ありません。
Okay, and next scene we have three people appear. We see one in yellow, blue, and red, kind of like a Power Rangers. And here, one of them says, 突然申し訳ありません. So, 突然 means to do something suddenly, right? 突然. Here, it's actually an expression to say, look, this is sudden, but, almost like saying I'm sorry. This is sudden, but, 突然申し訳ありません. So, 申し訳ありません is a way of saying this is absolutely inexcusable. So, we can see that he's saying that, look, he's very much apologizing, right? Like, I'm sincerely sorry for this. So, kind of like our sincerest apologies.
こんな時間にガキどもが揃って何の用だ。
こんな時間に at a time like this, ガキどもが So gakidomo is a way of speaking of kind of like brats or kids. I'm not sure why he's speaking in this way right now. Like maybe he's just a really grumpy old guy maybe. So gaki is for like a brat or a kid. Gakidomo is now a way of talking about them in plural. So you little youngins, you little kids, you little brats. Gakidomo ga, you little rascals. You guys are sorotte. So here, soro means to gather together, to assemble. Assemble is kind of funny because they're kind of like Power Rangers, but anyway. So, gakidomo ga sorotte, you kids have come together, you've assembled together, nan no yo da. So, nan is what kind of, and then yo is kind of like a business, use, or purpose. So, what purpose do you have? What's going on, right? What are you guys doing? Nan no yo da.
実は私たち盗賊団に追われているんです。どうか力を貸していただけませんか。
And here Dimitri replies with 実は私たち盗賊団に追われていたんです。 So 実は this is a way of saying, well, the truth is, right, as a matter of fact. It's kind of a way to kind of show that, hey, like this is actually what's going on, right? 実は just to tell you the truth, as a matter of fact, watashi tachi, us, and then we have tozoku dan. So tozoku is another one of those really super common words that you'll see in fantasy settings to talk about thieves, burglars, bandits, right? This is super common. So tozoku, put that in your head. If you're going to play any RPG game, you're going to come across this word. Tozoku dan, this means a band of thieves, a band of bandits, right? Dan here is for a group. So it's a group of bandits. Tozoku dan ni owarete itan desu. So o actually means to chase or to pursue after someone. So if you're kind of right, you're kind of chasing after someone's walking and you're like hiding behind the corner and kind of following them, or just actually literally chasing, that is this all, right? So here he's saying that they are being chased by a group of bandits. Tozoku dan ni owarete itan desu. And we can see that he's explaining the situation because it has the des. So he's explaining, it is that we are being chased by a group of bandits. Then he says, どうか力を貸していただけませんか? So, どうか means like somehow. But when you see どうか, you often feel like he's now going to ask a question. So like, could you please, could you somehow or other, Chikara is your strength, right? So if you have, power and strength, that is your Chikara. Chikaraを貸していただけませんか? Kasu here is to lend. Kashite itadaku means to receive someone lending for you. So kashite itadakemasen ka is, isn't it that we can receive you lending your chikara, your strength? So if we put it all together, we have どうか力を貸していただけませんか? Is there somehow that you would be able to lend us your strength?
盗賊だと?
盗賊だと? So, 盗賊, the robbers, the bandits, だと, you say. So, bandits, you say.
ええ、野営中に襲撃されたのです。
ええ、野営中に襲撃されたのです。So, え is like yes, and then 野営 here means to do camping. So, while they were camping, 野営中, so 野営 for making camp or while camping. Chu is another interesting bit of language that we've actually learnt in the last kanji video, and this means while doing something, right? While in the middle of something. Yae chu means while in the middle of camping. Yae chu ni, and then we have shugeki sareta. Shugeki is to be just attacked, right? We have kind of be raided, to be charged, to be attacked. Shugeki sareta means we have been attacked. So it's kind of like osowareta, we've been attacked, shugeki sareta. And this shugeki really has a feeling of like suddenly and unexpectedly being attacked by something. By being attacked by who? By being attacked by the bandits. When? Yae-chu, while camping.
うまいこと仲間と分断されて多勢に無勢金どころか命まで取られるところでしたよ
And then the last of the three guys here, he says うまいこと仲間と分断されて多勢に無勢金どころか命まで取られるところでしたよ So, quite a lot of language, let's break it all down. So, first we have うまいこと So, うまいこと Umai means to do something skillfully, and umai koto is kind of like saying like jozu ni, to do something well or skillfully or tactfully. So umai koto nakama to bundan sareru. So nakama is your allies, your friends, you know, the people on your side, your allies, your colleagues. And then we have bundan sareru. So bundan means to be divided into parts, right? Bun is kind of a part, and then dan is to kind of like put it into parts. So you bundan is like have this feeling of you had together and now boom, two parts. Bundan sarete, and then we have taze ni buze. Now taze ni buze, this is a military term to say that you are outnumbered. So we were outnumbered. So if we have a look, umai koto, skillfully, nakama to bundan sarete, we were skillfully separated from our allies, and then we have taze ni buze, we were outnumbered. Kane dokoro ka, so kane here means money, right? So your coins and stuff, that is your money, kane. Dokoro ka means even this, like not just this, let alone this, to say nothing of this. Now, dokoro ka is actually a grammar point that we'll cover later in the grammar series, but it's to say, like, needless to say of the first thing, even the second thing. So to say nothing of money, kane dokoro ka inochi made, up until your life. So to say, you know, like not even worrying about money, even our lives, torareru tokoro deshita. So torareru tokoro means that we were about to have stolen, and then deshita was. So we were about to have not only our money, or to say nothing of money, but even our lives stolen. Kane dokoro ka inochi made torareru tokoro deshita yo.
その割には随分とのんきな。ん？その制服。
その割には随分とのんきな。ん？その制服。So, その割には. その割 here is actually to refer to like considering all that, right? Wari is actually to kind of say like wari ni is to be comparatively or relatively. And so sono wari is like considering that, right? Relative to that. Sono wari ni wa, considering all of that or, you know, unexpectedly. Zuibun to. Zuibun means quite, considerably, very. Zuibun to nonkina. So nonki here means to be quite carefree, and this character is quite a carefree character. So he says, you know, considering all that's happened, you're pretty carefree. Sono wari ni wa zuibun to nonki na. Huh? Sono seifuku. Sono, that, and then seifuku here is the word for a uniform. So your school uniform would be seifuku. A work uniform would be a seifuku. And here, he's kind of referring to their school uniform, or maybe their group's uniform, however you would call it here in Fire Emblem. I guess school is probably the right case here, so seifuku is your uniform.
村の外に人影。かなりの大所帯だ。
And then another guard appears, and this time he seems to be reporting something, and he says, 村の外に人影。かなりの大所帯だ。So, 村の外, mura is the village, soto is outside of. So outside of the village, mura no soto ni, so something is happening outside of the village, hitokage. So hitokage means that it's kind of the figure of something, the shadows of people. So he's saying that he has seen the kind of shadows of people outside of the village. So it's kind of like maybe there were flames and you see the shadows of people running by. It gives that kind of imagery of, you know, they're coming, right? So mura no soto ni hitokage. Kind of like a t in English, or kind of like clicking your tongue, right? This ch, right? It's like, come on, right? That kind of, right? That's what this ch here is. And then we have Kanari no ojotai. So kanari means considerably, like quite a lot, and then ojotai means kind of a large amount, right? So he's saying that quite a large amount of bandits were seen outside of the village, mura no soto.
来やがったか。たく。ガキどもはともかく、この村を見捨てるわけにはいかねえ。
And so Gerardo says, 来やがったか、たく。ガキどもはともかく、この村に見捨てるわけにはいかねえ。So, 来やがる. Kuru means to come. 来やがる is showing disdain for their action. Their disdain for coming. So, 来やがる means kind of, they came, huh? Showing disdain towards the fact that they've come. Taku, geez, or Gakidomo wa tomokaku, so never mind the kids. When you say something wa tomokaku, that means like, you know, putting that aside, right? Putting aside the kids. Gakidomo wa tomokaku, putting aside the kids. Kono mura o, so this village, misteru wake ni wa ikane. Misteru means to kind of abandon, right? To kind of give up looking for something. So, wake ni wa ikanai means that there is no way that I could do it, right? Just, there's no way that I could do it. So, let alone the kids, there's no way that I could abandon the village. So, here we have, Gakidomo wa tomokaku, kono mura o misteru wake ni wa ikane.
Oi, iku zo. Yoi wa ii na.
And so he turns to you and he says, Oi, ikuzo, yoi wa ii na. So oi is like, hey, ikuzo is let's go. You see this zo particle often, it's not really used so much in real life unless you're actually referring to being a little bit more like an anime character or a video game character. You can use it in real life, especially if you're joking around with friends, but generally it's just a really emphasized version of yo, and usually in real life, yo is enough. Right? So ikuzo is kind of like a kind of a fun way of, you know, let's go, right? That type of feeling. So, oi, ikuzo. Hey, let's go. Yoi wa ii na. So, yoi here means your preparations. Wa ii, they're okay. Na, right? So, preparations are okay, right? Yoi wa ii na. If you remember, he said earlier on to make sure that, you know, to get your preparations ready. And so that's what he's referring to here. Yay! Congratulations everyone, you have now finished episode 4 of Game Gengo's Vocabulary Series. So, how was this episode? Hopefully this was a little bit more action-packed and interesting and varied than the last episode. I'm so sorry guys that the last episode was a little bit stale. I couldn't really help it, right? The episode was set in the airport. It was a lot of really useful language, and I felt like with the Animal Crossing, I just had to cover that, really to kind of help everyone get through that hurdle. Because I think for a lot of players, that hurdle would be quite difficult to get over, and they might just end up skipping it. So hopefully with that last episode, you guys are able to get into Animal Crossing and actually play yourself. So this was a really, really interesting episode here with Fire Emblem. Some really interesting language, some pieces of language that you may never need to use, but some pieces of language that are actually really useful, and a weird, interesting connection between kind of old archaic Japanese and Kansai Ben. There's quite a lot of connections here, like, you know, senka and the oru instead of iru, right? Really, really interesting how we can see this connection, and thanks to being highlighted here with Fire Emblem, you know, we're able to actually see it being used in context as well. So that was a really, really fun episode. So for the next recommendation that I have for the next 3 games that I would really like to see, the first game that I'd really like to see next is actually a brand new game that is kind of a special treasure of mine that I really want to share more with you guys, and that is Boku no Natsuyasumi. So this game is honestly my heart condensed. This is just happiness, pure joy, and it's also one of the most useful games to learn Japanese with, period. And I'll actually be making a video sometime soon actually showcasing exactly why, so please look forward to that. But if you'd like to see it covered in the vocabulary series, please feel free to vote for this game. Now, the next game that I'm recommending for the vocab series is Near Replicant. Now, I know I've already talked about this last time, but I really enjoy this game and would actually really like to cover some of this game. So if you're interested in Near Replicant, please feel free to vote for that. I might not necessarily start from the beginning. I don't know, maybe I could give it a go, trying to cover a certain scene. If there's a scene that you guys want to, see covered, maybe I don't actually have to start from the beginning. Maybe I could start from a certain scene. Let me know what you guys think. And for the third episode that I recommend is, of course, Project Triangle Strategy. Now, I know I'm probably going to have to give up on this one. The last voting poll only had 5% of votes for Project Triangle Strategy. Why? It looks so amazing. But it's okay. If you guys don't want to see it, that's fine. Because what I'm going to be doing for this series, just as a kind of heads up, for every 5th episode, every 5th episode of the vocabulary series, it's going to be picked personally by me. This was actually a suggestion that I heard from one of the fans in the Game Gengo Discord, and I think it was just absolutely genius. So we have 4 episodes that are voted by you, and then the 5th one I will choose. So this allows me to kind of just have a little bit of power, showing you something that I think maybe would be really interesting and useful for you guys for your Japanese studies, or maybe just a whole lot of fun, right? Or maybe it's just a game that I want to cover that I really, really love. So that's what I'm thinking, right? Every 5th game will be a Game Gengo special choice where I actually personally pick the game for the 5th episode, for the 10th episode, and the 15th episode, and so on. So, all of your votes for this episode will go on to episode 6 of the vocabulary series, as well as all of your votes at the end of next episode. So I'll be putting them all together, the votes for episode 4 and 5, all of the votes in the comment section, I will be tallying up and putting towards episode 6, and I'm gonna put in some special interesting treats for episode 5. It's not what you think. So, some interesting game I'm going to cover for episode 5. I have so many that I want to cover, really, so many. And so I'm actually thinking about starting a new series where I kind of introduce some of the games that I love. And so please look forward to that. We've got quite a bit of upcoming content that's coming up soon, as well as the Final Fantasy series, guys. I've had a few comments lately, like asking for the Final Fantasy VII series to come back. It's not dead. It's just I'm only one man and there's only so much I can do, and I definitely have not stopped that series. It's just a huge undertaking, right? The last episode was 7 hours, and the next one could be maybe 5 hours or so. It's a little bit of a shorter chapter, but still, it's a huge video. So, it is coming. Please just wait. It will be coming soon, possibly being done during the holiday break, but we shall see. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. A huge thank you to all of the supporters on Patreon. Thank you so much, guys, for all of your support. Huge love hearts to all of you all. Thank you very much for enjoying the channel and all of the videos that I've been making. I hope they've been helping you with your Japanese studies, and please feel free to leave a comment down in the comment section below if you ever have any suggestions or ideas. I'm always open to hearing those ideas. So as always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you continue to enjoy your Japanese studies, and I'll see you all again next time. See ya.